Good morning, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge that the land we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with the country. It is my pleasure to share the stage with our Federal Assistant Minister for Social Services, also the Minister for Housing Public Works of Queensland, and of course can I acknowledge my shadow spokesperson on social housing, Rachel Sanderson. I also want to thank Dr. Ian Winter, the team from Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute. Thank you for choosing Adelaide. It is spring in Adelaide. It's warming up. Tomorrow it's 29, so you might even get a bit of sunburn if you stay long enough. Today we have assembled a gathering in this room of some of the nation's best minds. Collectively, you bring massive experience and insight to this important discussion. When the South Australian Housing Trust was founded in 1936, it was the first government housing agency in Australia. Public housing was our only housing assistance. We now have more than 40 programs to help with private rental, homelessness and domestic violence, amongst others. South Australia also supports the growth of multi-provider system with a bigger role for community housing providers. In South Australia today, the housing market is affordable for most, but not all. About 15% of households need some form of government assistance to access housing. Some people need long-term help to live independently, while others need short-term help to get back on their feet. Just as people's needs vary, supports and subsidies in our current system vary in both duration and amount. Despite our best efforts, the type of assistance doesn't always match the type of need. Housing assistance in the future should direct people to the pathway and subsidy that is most suitable to them. Housing assistance in the future also needs to acknowledge that it operates in a wider environment. On the demand side, many who need housing assistance also access other help, including welfare payments, health services, disability supports, aged care, and family and child services, amongst others. On the supply side, the price and availability of housing is affected by all three levels of government through complex tax, subsidy and regulatory arrangements. When we talk about housing assistance and those who access it, we must consider this bigger picture. The National Disability Insurance Scheme provides one window to the potential future of housing assistance. Resources are allocated based on need, and consumers have a choice about how resources are used. Many providers will need to compete for business rather than having customers allocated to them. But these reforms are being implemented over many years with an approximate doubling of funding into the system. In April this year, AHURI ran the first of these one-day conferences in Melbourne called My Way Home, Competition and Choice in Human Services. I understand that it was a great success and there was much discussion on what housing assistance provided could learn from disability services and the NDIS. Some preconditions were highlighted for competition and choice to work well. Enough supply to make providers complete, enough information to support good decisions, and enough resources for consumers to make decisions. Any or all of these factors can be barriers into the future of housing assistance. Over the last 20 years, there have been numerous government reviews for housing assistance reform. Some of the recommendations included allowing rent assistance to be converted to a lump sum to be used for a deposit for home purchase, the payment of Commonwealth rent assistance to public housing tenants, and increasing the amount of competition and choice in the market. Australia has been talking about these and similar reforms for 2 decades. I don't underestimate the challenge ahead. Despite the challenge of getting many jurisdictions to agree on reform, we have been making progress where we can. As we heard earlier, the South Australian Government has made a commitment to renew 4,500 older housing trust homes within 10 kilometres of the city by 2020. We have begun the 1,000 Homes in 1,000 Days initiative, which includes 100 homes for people living with a disability. South Australia, along with Western Australia, has a government-backed mortgage lender with products for low and moderate income households. And in fact, in 2004, I had one of those Home Start loans because as a graduate, I hadn't saved enough for a deposit, and we'd seen house prices double here in South Australia. I know the value of home ownership as a means to help get people on their feet. In South Australia, we are reforming our services to have a greater focus on and response to risk and vulnerability. We are making policies easier to read and easier to access. We are thinking about who our future customers will be and how to address their needs. Research shows us that over the next decade, there will be increasing numbers of women who are older, single, and without means to access long-term secure housing. Various factors have contributed to this, including longer lives, shorter marriages, gender pay gaps, and social norms regarding domestic and caring responsibilities. These women are being called the future face of homelessness. It is something that I find particularly concerning. And that's why in our recent state budget, we committed $150,000 to investigate new housing options for this group. One option is a new shared equity model so that these women, many who lack money but have plenty of capacity, can own and control their housing future. This is consistent with the Commonwealth Government's investment approach to welfare, which aims to use early intervention to avoid long-term contact with the welfare system. Similarly, my department is working with our partners in Adelaide's northern suburbs to increase economic participation amongst those who are often excluded. The scope of housing funding choices is evolving in new and interesting ways, many of which are less dependent on traditional government funding. Emerging funding options, including crowdsourcing and social impact investment, provide exciting opportunities. South Australia is embracing these new options while we navigate the challenges that come with trying anything new. We're establishing our first social impact bond and investigating new approaches to private rental assistance. Two great local organisations, the Hutt Street Centre and Common Ground Adelaide, will partner in the new bond. It aims to provide housing and case management to end homelessness for 400 people. Investor returns are linked to client participation and successful outcomes. This conference is about the future of housing assistance. We know that the National Partnership Agreement on Homelessness ends on the 30th of June 2017. We also know there is no provision in the Commonwealth budget for the National Partnership Agreement beyond that date. I have advocated strongly for long-term funding for homelessness and for a clear decision by the end of this year. We can achieve more in housing reform over the next 20 years than we have in the last 20 years. But to begin with, we owe some certainty to those who need housing assistance the most and those who provide it. Leading up to COAG last year, I had the opportunity to talk to my Premier about what was most important. And there was a lot of talk about our concerns of education and health and the removal of Commonwealth money. When I spoke to him, I wanted to put forward the case for housing, because sometimes we're the third pillar, the fourth pillar that's talked about. When I speak to people who are in need, their lives are often quite chaotic. What they need is stability and safety. If you don't have a home, how can you support your children to go to school? How can you concentrate on your health? And how can you think about going to work? What I want to do, and I know I'm talking to the converted, is to remind people how important housing is. Housing gives us the tool to make other things happen. Thank you.